Political violence is never, ever acceptable in the United States political system. Never, never, never. It has no place in a democracy, none.
If we're so sure that Trump had lost by 7 million popular votes and that he has lost everything, and we think he will lose again, then what's the point of removing his name from the ballot? That actually is, in my opinion, the most unhinged thing that Trump did actually post. It's really weird for Biden to be like bragging almost about how many years in jail these people got. It's not real. Did he get a choir of January 6th insurrectionists to sing from jail? I feel like you can't have it both ways. Either democracy was going to collapse or it wasn't going to collapse. That's ridiculous. That's such an unhinged framing of the situation. We could be in for a banger. January 6, 2021. A small handful of people enter the U.S. Capitol building to do a little trolling. 4 people die of natural causes, if you count amphetamine overdose as a natural cause, and 1 person gets shot by Capitol Police, Ashley Babbitt. January 6, 2024, Joseph Robinette Biden gives a compelling speech addressing what had happened exactly 4 years ago. We're going to go through that speech today.
In the winter of 1777, it was harsh and cold as the Continental Army marched to Valley Forge. General George Washington knew he faced the most daunting of tasks, to fight and win a war against the most powerful empire existed in the world at the time. His mission was clear: liberty, not conquest; freedom, not domination; national independence, not individual glory.
I really wonder where Biden is going with this. It's very weird to start a January 6th speech by talking about the insurrection that everybody sees as an unequivocally good thing. I think that's a very interesting choice, so I'm not sure where he's going with that.
General Washington knew something in his bones, something about the spirit of the troops he was leading, something about the soul of the nation he was struggling to be born. In his general order, he predicted, and I quote, "With one heart and one mind, with fortitude and with patience, they would overcome every difficulty," the troops he was leading. And they did. They did.
Look at that. Biden said that entire quote with 0 gaffes. We could be in for a banger.
Donald Trump's campaign is about him, not America, not you. Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past, not the future.
See, that's the narrative that the Democrats will be running with, and Donald Trump, I think, has allowed them to run with that narrative. I think the endless litigation of the 2020 election is not going to be good for the GOP, because it's not going to be changed. It's not going to be rectified. No matter if people think it was a swindle or a steal or whatever, at this point it doesn't matter. But Trump is just on Truth Social endlessly litigating it over and over and over again. And this allows Biden to easily say that Trump is looking in the past and not into the future, because he is looking into the past. So I'm not sure why Trump repeatedly hands the Democrats this easy line that they get to repeatedly use.
Our campaign is different. For me and Kamala, our campaign is about America. It's about you. It's about every age and background that occupy this country. It's about the future we're going to continue to build together. And our campaign is about preserving and strengthening our American democracy. 3 years ago tomorrow.
That's right. Did I say 4 years ago? 3 years ago.
We saw with our own eyes the violent mob storm the United States Capitol. It was almost in disbelief as you first turned on the television. For the first time in our history, insurrectionists had come to stop the peaceful transfer of power in America. First time.
So I do think the irony is lost on Biden when he brings up the founding insurrection that started the United States to then talk about why insurrection is bad. Now, I'm not saying that's hypocritical, but it's weird. It's like I thought he was going to maybe contrast a good insurrection with a bad insurrection, but he's just ignoring the fact that he literally brought up an insurrection to then talk about insurrection. That's okay. That's okay.
Smashing windows, shattering doors, attacking the police. Outside, gallows were erected as the MAGA crowd chanted, hang Mike Pence.
Okay, so I know this is a common Republican talking point, but I still need to mention it. We really have to have a photo of what the media presented was the gallows that the crowd was allegedly going to hang Mike Pence from, and then we need to have a photo from a different angle of what the gallows really look like. And now, that's not me trying to justify the use of a symbolic gallows. I think it's very poor taste and weirdly committal to like do some like carpentry and like create a gallows, but that gallows was not intended to hang it. You could not hang someone from that.
What is this?
A gallows for ants. There's no world in which Mike Pence could have been dragged from the Capitol building, kicking and screaming, and then hanged from the gallows. So it's not good to have a symbolic gallows at a protest. But I think for Biden to pretend that this was actually going to be something that was used for violence, I mean, it's kind of a cheap trick, I think.
Over 140 police officers were injured. Jill and I attended the funeral of police officers who died as a result of the events of that day.
Is that fair? What he's talking about is the police officers who died from suicide up to like 6 months after the events. And if that was the reason that they took their own lives, fair enough. I feel like people kind of present, like the media did at first, that one police officer was hit with a fire extinguisher and then he died. But that's not actually what happened. He had 2 strokes the next day. And now, could those strokes have been like stress-induced because he was in altercations at the Capitol? Yes, but I feel like, I mean, even the Wikipedia page for January 6th says that that all these police officers died, and it's on the official like list. But then if you like actually look into it, there were like suicide deaths much later, and I don't know. It just feels like a little bit of a bait and switch there, but I get it.
As America was attacked from within, Donald Trump watched on TV in the private small dining room off the Oval Office. The entire nation watched in horror. The whole world watched in disbelief, and Trump did nothing. Members of his staff, members of his family, Republican leaders who were under attack at that very moment pled with him, act, call off the mob. Imagine had he gone out and said, stop. And still, Trump did nothing.
I've been trying to think about how fair this line of attack is, and I'm honestly not sure, because the Trump did nothing line of reasoning is true depending on your time scale and how quickly you think people should act, because within 2 hours of everything, Trump had then tweeted out that people should be peaceful, and this was before anything had happened majorly. This is before like Ashley Babbitt had been shot. I mean, depends what you mean by majorly. Stuff had still happened, but no one had died at this point. And, then within an hour after Babbitt died, Trump did tell everybody to go home.
We can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
And so, is that fast enough? I mean, probably not, but it's also one of those things where it's like, it's not like he did nothing and just let everyone run amok for, as long as it took for people to clear it. He did tell people to go home and then they went home. Is that 3-hour time window, is that completely egregious? I actually don't know. It's like, if you think about it minute by minute, it feels long, right? If you're actually watching and you're Trump and you're watching on TV that this is all happening, I could see that it feels like a long time. But at the same time, it's not like he just left it. He did at least do some basic mitigation stuff and then did eventually tell people to go home. The very special people.
Trump lost the popular vote by 7 million. Trump's claims about the 2020 election never could stand up in court. Trump lost 60 court cases, 60. Trump lost the Republican-controlled states. Trump lost before a Trump-appointed judge, and then judges. And Trump lost before the United States Supreme Court. All of it, he lost.
If Trump lost, which, okay, fine, then why not let him run again? And I've heard that, and I kind of agree with that. Like, if we're so sure that Trump had lost by 7 million popular votes, and that he has lost everything, and we and we think he will lose again, then what's the point of removing his name from the ballot? And I'm not saying Trump was the lawful winner of 2020 or anything, but I'm just saying that, like, we have this confidence that he didn't win, and he didn't win by a reasonable margin. And so I don't see the reason why we would pull him away. Like, that feels like a weird situation to be in, to be like, well, he lost by a ton, we won, it wasn't even close, but also let's not, like, do the vote a second time in 2024. Let's make sure Trump's not on the ballot. It's like, so something has happened.
In Atlanta, Georgia, a brave black mother and her daughter, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, were doing their jobs electing workers until Donald Trump and his MAGA followers targeted and threatened them, forcing them from their homes and unleashing racist vitriol on them.
I don't know if this is just misspeaking, but Donald Trump and his followers did all of this stuff. Donald Trump was doing racist remarks and threatening her and trying to scare her from her home. Like, you could say that Donald Trump is responsible and probably tweeted some nonsense or something, but Donald Trump didn't do those actions. There still has to be a separation between the person who's, like, saying stuff and the person who's actually doing the really bad stuff. And I think there's still responsibility to be had, that you shouldn't, like, direct attention onto, like, random people. But I don't think it's still not equivalent to say that Trump is doing those things. I don't think that's fair.
So knowing how his mind works now, he had one act left, one desperate act available to him: the violence of January the 6th. And since that day, more than 1,200 people have been charged for their assault on the Capitol. Nearly 900 of them have been convicted or pled guilty. Collectively, to date, they have been sentenced to more than 840 years in prison.
Is that a good thing? Like, that's weird to me, because I feel like I always hear Republicans talk about, and I think it's actually a fair talking point, that a lot of these rioters have gotten, like, quite ludicrous sentences for what's actually happened. And yes, they are statistically lower than what the average recommended sentence is, but the issue is that the crimes they're being charged for are disproportionate to what normally is charged. So yes, once you're already hit with one of these charges, then it's like people usually get a lot of years in jail, and they didn't get as many years in jail, but people usually aren't hit with these charges to begin with. So it's really weird for Biden to be, like, bragging almost about how many years in jail these people got. Like, that'd be like me being, like, anti-WikiLeaks and then bragging about how, like, Julian Assange is, like, was forced to stay in an embassy for so long and now he's gonna be extradited. It's like, that doesn't prove that what he did was, that proves maybe that I'm, like, prosecuting a lot. Obviously the January 6th protesters got a lot of time in jail, but I don't know if that is giving the impression or proving the point that Biden thinks it's proving.
What's Trump done? Instead of calling them criminals, he's called these insurrectionists patriots. They're patriots. And he promised to pardon them if he returns to office. Trump said that there was a lot of love on January the 6th.
Some would say that there are good people on both sides.
In trying to rewrite the facts of January 6th, Trump is trying to steal history the same way he tried to steal the election.
Donald Trump is trying to steal history, trying to steal mathematics, trying to steal science. He's trying to take it all.
Trump's mob wasn't a peaceful protest. It was a violent assault. They were insurrectionists, not patriots. They weren't there to uphold the Constitution. They were there to destroy the Constitution. Trump won't do what an American president must do. He refuses to denounce political violence. So hear me clearly. I'll say what Donald Trump won't. Political violence is never, ever acceptable in the United States political system. Never, never, never. It has no place in a democracy, none. You can't be pro-insurrectionist and pro-American.
Okay, yeah. I didn't realize that was actually said in his speech. I thought Biden tweeted that. That pairs exactly with what I said at the beginning of the video. Of course, like, you could say that you shouldn't be pro-insurrection now in America. It's just hilarious, though, and just, I don't know, maybe Trump has stolen history so much, and so maybe it's corrupted all of our view, but I mean, that was an insurrection. That America was founded on insurrection. Now, I'm not saying that means we should be doing insurrection now. It's just weird to say that you can't be pro-insurrection, pro-American when I think a lot of the first Americans would vehemently disagree with that.
Trump's assault on democracy isn't just part of his past. It's what he's promising for the future. He's being straightforward. He's not hiding the ball. His first rally for the 2024 campaign opened with a choir of January 6th insurrectionists singing from prison on a cell phone.
Is that real? Did Trump get a choir of January? That's not real. Did he get a choir of January 6th insurrectionists to sing from jail? We gotta play that video if that's out there.
Trump is now promising a full-scale campaign of revenge and retribution, his words, for some years to come. They were his words, not mine. He went on to say he'd be a dictator on day one. I mean, if I were writing a book of fiction, I said an American president said that, and not in jest.
Okay, is that actually a quote? I mean, it is strange. We do live in a world where it is crazy that I'm about to have to Google if that's a real quote or if Biden's just like saying some shit. Did Trump actually say that he will be a dictator on day one? Let's find out.
He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, no, other than day one.
Okay. That's a little different, I will say. Okay, like, yes, did he say he'd be a dictator on day one? I think when I heard Biden say that, it sounds like he will be a dictator on day one, like starting immediately and going forward. That seems very different than, I don't know, whatever joke Trump is making here, but saying he'll only be a dictator for a day. That at least, I'm not saying it's good, but that at least feels different than how Biden's presenting it. So still unhinged, still crazy, still strange. I had to look it up. Not as bad as I thought it would be.
He called, and I quote, the termination, quote, this is a quote, the termination of all the rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the U.S. Constitution.
That actually is, in my opinion, the most unhinged thing that Trump did actually post. Was on Truth Social when he made the tweet about overthrowing democracy. Actually, let's read that just for the fun of it. So with the revelation of massive and widespread fraud and deception and working closely with big tech companies, the DNC and the Democrat Party, do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out and declare the rightful winner, or do you have a new election? A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Our great founders did not want and would not condone false and fraudulent elections.
It's really kind of hard to believe. Even found in the Constitution, he could terminate? He's threatened the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with the death penalty. Says he should be put to death because the chairman put his oath to the Constitution ahead of his personal loyalty to Trump.
God, I feel like I have to fact check everything. Did Trump really say he was going to put him to death? I feel like I'm just going to make a prediction and say that it probably wasn't how it sounds like. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, yeah, see, I was right. He said that it was an act so egregious that in times gone by, the punishment would have been death. I'm just going to say that's different. Maybe that's carrying water. I just think that seems different. I don't know.
This is coming from a president who called, when he visited cemeteries, called dead soldiers suckers and losers. Remember that?
Biden's getting angry. You should see him clench his fists. I think it reminds me of when he said that John McCain, who was a prisoner of war and was tortured and stuff, that Donald Trump said that he likes his war heroes as people who don't get caught. So I wouldn't be surprised if he said this. Okay, this one, we can't know this. Apparently it's some people have alleged it, but there's no record of it, and Trump denies that he said it. So it's some like private conversation. Hard to know. Honestly, could go either way.
It was right around the time I was at Bo's grave, Tommy. How dare he? Who in God's name does he think he is?
I am going to be the greatest jobs president that God ever created.
For a quote that we don't even know the provenance of, Biden is going to bring up his dead son and talk about being in his grave, and then tie that into Trump calling soldiers potentially suckers. Like, I don't know. That feels weird.
Ordinary citizens, state election officials, the American judicial system had put the Constitution first, and sometimes at their peril. At their peril. Because of them, because of you, the will of the people prevailed. Not the anger of the mob or the appetites of one man.
See, I agree with Biden. I agree that American democracy was upheld by the judicial system, by Mike Pence, by the other senators and the House Representatives. But I feel like you can't have it both ways. Either democracy was going to collapse or it wasn't going to collapse. I think you can't treat the insurrection as if everything was going to collapse if Trump just pushed a little harder, but then simultaneously say, look how strong the country is, that we have enough safeguards that didn't happen. That would be my argument for why this wasn't an insurrection, because I don't think there was a possibility of this going in some like doomsday scenario. I don't think that was possible. I think this was a very bad thing that happened on January 6th. I think a lot of what Trump did wasn't good, but I don't see how this is this democracy ending event that was moments away from taking place, and for the exact reasons that Biden just gave. So it's hard to have it in both ways.
When the attack on January 6th happened, there was no doubt about the truth. At the time, even Republican members of Congress and Fox News commentators publicly and privately condemned the attack. As one Republican senator said, Trump's behavior was embarrassing and humiliating for the country. But now that same senator and those same people have changed their tune. As time has gone on, politics, fear, money, all have intervened. And now these MAGA voices who know the truth about Trump on January 6th have abandoned the truth and abandoned the democracy. They made their choice.
I mean, they made their choice in what direction. I think you can still think that what Trump did involving the 2020 election was deplorable and that it was cowardly and it wasn't good. I feel like you can make all those arguments, but then still think that Trump should be allowed to run on the ballot and still even vote for him. I don't see how those things have to be unified. I think that a political candidate can do some dastardly things, and then you're still like, well, it's either the Republicans or it's the Democrats or it's this nominee or it's that nominee. Like, you still always have these like decisions to make. So I don't know, unless these people are changing their mind enough that they're like, January 6th was actually a great thing and they are patriots, then fine. Okay, then maybe we can talk about fear, money, and politics all intervening. But if the stance is just what he did was terrible, but we still think he should be allowed to vote and we would still even support him, I don't think that's necessarily hypocritical.
Today, I make this sacred pledge to you: the defense, protection, and preservation of American democracy will remain, as it has been, the central cause of my presidency.
That's absurd. That is ridiculous. That is such an unhinged framing of the situation. Democracy is on the ballot. I mean, that sounds like something Trump would say. I don't know. Everyone wants to act like every current election is like the most important election of our time. And it's just, I don't know. I'm just tired of that framing of just like, if Trump wins, I think we're going to have 4 years of Trump. If Biden wins, again, we're going to have 4 years of Biden. I don't see this like this weird dystopian talk of everything is going to come melting down if the wrong person wins. I don't think that's like helpful, and I don't think it's true.
But if democracy falls, we'll lose that freedom. We'll lose the power of we, the people, to shape our destiny. If you doubt me, look around the world. Travel with me as I meet with other heads of state throughout the world. Look at the authoritarian leaders and dictators Trump says he admires. He out loud says he admires. I won't go through them all. It'll take too long. Look, remember how he refers to what he calls love letter exchanges between he and the dictator of North Korea? Those women and men out there in the audience who ever fought for the American military, would you ever believe you'd hear a president say something like that? His admiration for Putin. I could go on.
This line of reasoning has always frustrated me. I don't understand why people have an inability to see that when you're dealing with other nation states, you obviously have to do some concessions. You have to interact with these people. The world is now faced with interacting with the fucking Taliban because the Taliban is the ruler of Afghanistan. So any change or any deal or any whatever that we want to run through Afghanistan has to go through the Taliban now. That's kind of just life. And if anything, to me, I see Trump being a businessman. I think he probably understands that even if you hate the person's guts, you still have to like play ball. So him playing ball with Kim Jong-un and him playing ball with Putin, I feel like that's just what you have to do. I don't know. Like there's a point at which it goes too far, but it's weird for me to not interpret this as a default as, well, he probably doesn't actually like love Putin. He's probably not like super thrilled with Kim Jong-un. He's probably doing this stuff in a strategic way. Like I feel like that's just like the obvious answer. So it's weird when everyone presents it like, oh, he's bowing down to Russia and he's making friends with North Korea. It's like he's doing negotiations. Like that's what you have to do in world politics, I would assume.
And look at what these autocrats are doing to limit freedom in their countries. They're limiting freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to assemble, women's rights, LGBTQ rights. People are going to jail, so much more. It's true, the push and pull of American history is not a fairy tale. Every stride forward in America is met with ferocious backlash many times from those who fear progress and those who exploit that fear for their own personal gain. From those who traffic in lies, told for power and profit. For those who are driven by grievance and grift, consumed by conspiracy and victimhood. From those who seek to bury history and ban books. Do you ever think you'd be in a political event talking about book banning for the presidential election?
I can't leave that one alone, okay? I mean, we cannot compare what's happening now with the so-called book bans with stuff that happened back in the day when books were actually banned. A book not being allowed at like a school library or not taught in a curriculum is not the same as just like mass burning of books to get rid of them. So it's like, I don't know. That's such like a weak point. I mean, no one is banning books. Books are not being like disallowed to be bought or purchased. Debating whether books should be allowed in school or not, I think is a debate that we need to have, and we've always had it. There's always been certain types of books that you can't have in a school library. I don't want to get too into that, but I feel like there's a lot of weird points being made that I feel like there's easy like pushback from it. And I know it's like, yeah, I'm sure if you analyze the Republican speech, you can have the same thing, right? You're gonna have like these little points, but it's still just frustrating to see stuff framed in what I think is like a dishonest way.
The vast majority of us still believe that everyone deserves a fair shot at making it. We're still a nation that gives hate no safe harbor. I tell you from my experience working with leaders around the world, and I mean this sincerely, not a joke, that America is still viewed as the beacon of democracy for the world.
See, with all this talk of democracy, this is the confusing part. It's like, yeah, okay, America is great, and America's founded on an idea, and America is a shining example of democracy. But then at the same time, we have a bunch of states making it so Trump is not going to appear on a Republican primary ballot. And like, that doesn't seem democratic to me. And I understand that they're using the Constitution to do it. And I think that SCOTUS will probably overthrow it anyway. But it just seems like holding two ideas that you can't really hold at the same time, especially because of the way everything's set up. So it's like the 14th Amendment has the insurrection clause in it that says that you can't hold office if you've been guilty of an insurrection, right? But it's not guilty in the sense of having committed a crime and found guilty for that crime. It's just, have you done an insurrection? But then who's deciding if an insurrection has been done? Because Trump has neither been charged nor convicted with an insurrection. So to me, that feels like kind of a weird, wishy-washy, hand-wavy way to disallow a candidate from being on a ballot of a democratic election, but then we're championing democracy and how America's so great for being democratic. So I don't know. That feels like a weird inconsistency.
This is the first national election since January 6th. Insurrection placed a dagger at the throat of American democracy since that moment. We all know who Donald Trump is. The question we have to answer is, who are we? That's what's at stake. Who are we? In the year ahead, as you talk to your family and friends, cast your ballots. The power is in your hands. After all we've been through in our history, from independence to civil war to 2 world wars to a pandemic to insurrection, I refuse to believe that in 2024 we Americans will choose to walk away from what's made us the greatest nation in the history of the world. Freedom, liberty, democracy is still a sacred cause, and there's no country in the world better positioned to lead the world than America.
A surprisingly cogent video from Biden, a surprisingly good speech, very few gaffes. He was definitely on the ball. I think the framing is strange. I think it's weird to paint the coming election as if you're choosing democratically. You're democratically choosing between democracy and dictatorship. I don't think that's going to work, but I guess we'll see in 10 or so months if that works or not. I don't think it will. I don't think it's a good, healthy framing. I think that if we're talking about freedom and liberty, then people have the freedom and liberty to choose Donald Trump again if they want to choose Donald Trump again. And I think the democracy will still continue. So maybe Biden thinks that's the best thing to run on, and maybe with his base it is. I don't know if it's going to be convincing with any Republicans to switch, and I don't know if it's going to be convincing for any people that are in the middle to choose Democrat over Republican, but I guess that's up in the air. Oh, wait. Let's pick a new drug. Can this be our thing? Sponsored by Zolpidem, because being awake is for losers.